Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
So I hope you've had a good Tuesday. Hope you're well wherever you are. Yeah, the Betsy DeVos story, staggering, isn't it? Staggering! How will the Alex Joneses of this world defend that? Well, I'm sure they'll find a way to defend it. We're not going to talk about it too much today, though. We're going to crack on. It's already 5.5 minutes past the hour. Now, Sky News propaganda. You might remember I told you a couple of weeks back. I shouldn't phrase it like that, should I? I told you. I don't tell you anything. I share opinions with you from time to time. I did share an opinion with you a couple of weeks ago that Sky had gone from not asking questions, suppressing information, the things they normally do, denying speakers access to their shows, but that they'd taken a turn for the worse. Sky were now making stories up themselves and taking unsubstantiated stories from third parties and endorsing them in a very, 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 very strong way. Now, this is Sky News today. You might have heard Rebecca Foster on the news there saying that Amnesty International has claimed that as many as 13,000 people, most of them civilian opposition, have been executed in secret at a prison in Syria. They allege that mass hangings took place every week at Sadnaya prison, Sadnaya I think it's pronounced, Sadnaya prison, between September 2011 and December 2015. Mass hangings every week, claim Amnesty. Over 13,000 people killed at Sadnaya prison between 2011 and December of last year. December 2 years ago, 2015. Amnesty says these alleged executions were authorised at the highest levels of the government. The government has previously denied, of course, killing or mistreating detainees. However, UN human rights experts have weighed in. They say that they said a year ago witness accounts and documentary evidence strongly suggested that tens of thousands of people were being detained and that deaths on a massive scale were occurring in custody. No documentary evidence, by the way, has been produced, right? Just want to get that clear. None. Amnesty interviewed 84 people, it claims. 84 people, it claims. Okay, you heard that if you were watching Sky News today, including guards, detainees and officials at Sadnaya prison for its report. This is Sky News today. Pay attention to Adam Bolton, the presenter.
Amnesty International says it has uncovered evidence the Syrian government sanctioned the mass hanging of 13,000 people at a prison near Damascus. Most were believed to be civilians opposed to the Assad regime. From the start of the Syrian uprising 6 years ago until 2015, Amnesty says groups of 20 to 50 people were hanged once or twice a week in the middle of the night at Sadnaya prison. Inmates called the prison the slaughterhouse. The human rights group believes that 17,000 people have died from torture and abuse in Syrian detention facilities. Inmates who survived have been telling their stories.
No one knows the real numbers. No one knows the ugly kinds of torture that occur inside.
When we were beaten in front of the cells, I had seen a lot of blood on the floor. There was a rancid and bloody smell.
Well, let's get the views of our diplomatic editor, Dominic Waghorn, at Sky News Centre. Dominic, in a sense, it's no surprise that the Assad regime has violated human rights, but this is a massive documentation against Assad, and yet the current mood appears to be to work with Assad somehow in Syria.
Right, you heard that, right? Adam Bolton, allegedly a journalist, former chief political correspondent for Sky, said, and I quote, "It's no surprise that the Assad regime has violated human rights." Now that's propaganda right there. That is not journalism. That in fact is known as editorialising. It's not journalism. Where's the proof? Now his correspondent, Dominic Waghorn, is just as bad.
Right, I mean, we've known that tens of thousands of people have gone missing, and they are generally civilians who have done, in many cases, not anything more than either gone out and protested or just helped protesters by bringing them food. We've spoken to doctors who have helped treat those who've been injured after protests. All those are seen as enemies of the Assad regime because the regime from the start tried to brutally suppress a peaceful revolution with the narrative that it was dealing with terrorists and extremists. So anyone who was protesting or acting against the government who wasn't a terrorist or extremist was an enemy of the state and went into these kind of prisons in their tens of thousands.
Again, incredible propaganda from Waghorn. Tens of thousands, he said. Protesters, he said. Locked up and murdered for protesting, said Waghorn. Again, there is no evidence whatsoever. And you and I are supposed to believe Rupert Murdoch's goons, right? Because that's what Adam Bolton and Dominic Waghorn are, and Kay Burley. Goons for Rupert Murdoch. These are the same people who lied about moderate rebels. That insane catchphrase they used to convince people here that lovely, fluffy, freedom-loving people had taken a stand against the Assad government. Moderate rebels who were only killing people moderately. That's after the government decided to start killing tens of thousands of people and disappearing more, according to them. These are the same liars who didn't just cheerlead the war in Iraq, if you remember. They didn't just cheerlead it, they demanded it. They demanded it. And they embedded their journalists with British and American troops to lie and lie and lie and lie as Iraq and Afghanistan were burned to the ground. Burned to the ground. And later on, of course, Libya. I would say, judging on going on the lies that these news organisations in inverted commas have told over the decades, based on the previous lies, the Assad government has not interned tens of thousands of innocent civilians. They have not held execution parties every week for years, hanging people. It's ludicrous. If they were going to do that, they would shoot them. Logistically, it's a nightmare to do what Amnesty International have described, hanging all those people. It's a nightmare to do that. If you wanted to kill them, you'd shoot them. But it's not happened. They haven't executed tens of thousands of people who disagreed with the government because there weren't tens of thousands of people who disagreed with the government to begin with. This was paradise on earth, this country, over the last 20 years, particularly the last 10. There's no evidence. Syria was invaded by Wahhabi Islamists, supplied by Saudi Arabia and armed to the teeth by the CIA, MI5, MI6 and Mossad. That's what Bashar al-Assad has had to deal with. And am I saying that government forces are angels? No, I'm not. People do terrible things in conflict. You'll find crimes everywhere. But the Assad government didn't start it. They did not start a civil war by clamping down on so-called moderate rebels and genuine protesters. We know that. There's no civil war in Syria. Another media bullshit misnomer. There is no civil war. There is none. The US, the UK, France, the Saudis and Israel are fighting a proxy war there against the legitimate Syrian government using Islamic State to do that. So who brought this out today? Amnesty International. Now, if you didn't know too much about Amnesty International, you would say to yourself, well, they're a human rights organisation. They're a non-governmental organisation that seeks to protect the human rights of people all over the world. They are completely independent and they shoot from the hip against human rights abuses anywhere. Right? Wrong. This is what Amnesty International claim on their own website. This is what they claim. They say, we do not accept any money from governments or political parties, so we are free to criticise governments and others for abusing people's rights or for failing to protect them. Because we are independent of any government, political ideology, economic interest or religion, we can take action to defend human rights wherever they are violated. Because we are independent of government, political ideology, economic interest or religion, we can take action wherever it is warranted, they say. And Amnesty Australia has gone further in recent years, and they've said surveys of Amnesty International supporters show that non-acceptance of government funding is a primary reason for support. So people who support Amnesty do so because they believe that there is no government funding for Amnesty International. You know what? I didn't have to do too much digging today, my friend, to find out that Amnesty International has been receiving nearly £1 million a year since 2011 from the UK Department for International Development. They've received millions in total from the UK government. Imagine. Who else gives the money? Will you be surprised to learn the United States? This is the NGO who tells you we are completely pure and we are above reproach because we don't take money from anybody. Now, the United Kingdom and the United States give money to Amnesty. Which two countries, more than any in the world, would stand to benefit from a story suggesting that Bashar al-Assad's forces were holding execution parties every week for years? Hang on while I scratch my bald head. I've no more to say about that. 16 minutes past the hour. You'll remember I predicted, I don't get much right, but I get some things right, that eventually in this country there will be a second referendum on the European Union. I've said sometime in around 2018, maybe 2019. I've been saying basically there will be constant references made to the fact that 16 and 17-year-olds couldn't vote, and it's their future. 20-somethings wanted to stay in as well. The mood has changed, and we need to have another referendum. Remember, I've been saying that for months. Now, Nick Clegg, the former leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, and a staunch Remainer, was on Sky News today, again speaking with Adam Bolton.
What we voted against is something which the government does not have a mandate for, is to impose a hard Brexit, one which yanks us out of the single market as well as the rest of the political institutions of the European Union. The government has no mandate to do that. And also, I think it is essential that we do, funnily enough, what people like David Davis and other Eurosceptics used to advocate, which is give the British people a say at the end of the process, much as they, of course, initiated the process in the first place.
Nick Clegg, eh? Have another referendum at the end of the negotiation, he said. Brilliant. Which would effectively, of course, be a rerun of the in-out referendum anyway, wouldn't it? And it's not just Clegg, there are growing calls for this because they will never allow the United Kingdom leave the European Union. Clegg also reiterated today the fact that the vote was close in some way taints the result of it. The closeness of it wasn't that close, by the way. 52-48 is not that close, really. It isn't. Not as close as they want you to believe. Clegg said it was close, and in some way that taints the result. Listen to Clegg.
Now listen, if 70% of British people on the 23rd of June had won, if young people who actually have to inhabit the future which we're now moulding for them, all as one or overwhelmingly felt that we should leave the European Union, do so in the most uncompromising manner, people like me would not have a leg to stand on. That is not what happened. And I think what is extraordinary is the way that history is, and of course the victors in politics can always do this. They have the pen to rewrite history, and they're busily rewriting history. If you listen to some of the splenetic stuff from the Brexiteers, you'd imagine that the whole country voted for Brexit with the exception of Ken Clarke and myself. It was a much more evenly divided outcome, and I think as a Prime Minister, the responsible thing, particularly when you know that Scotland, Northern Ireland, our capital city, London, voted otherwise, is to plot a more moderate course towards Brexit.
Not challenged a single time. I'm sure the interview is on their YouTube channel. Not challenged even once by Adam Bolton. Those old people, eh? Screw the old people. All those senior citizens' votes shouldn't count because they won't be alive. It's all about the young people. And this is the way it's going to be framed in the next year to 18 months. It's going to be framed like that. The political landscape is changing. the mood of the country is changing. That's how they're going to play it out. Keep your tweets coming in to @RichieAllenShow. Email richie@richieallen.co.uk. Mark tweets, the same scenario was acted out in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya and now Syria. Invaded and bombed into submission. Yes, Mark, but with the consent of now, and the aiding and abetting by the mainstream media. Chris tweets, Syria war was started by USA, CIA, Mossad, UK, covert undercover military operations and paid mercenaries. Faisal, thanks for the link to the article there. Number of people asking questions about the validity of the evidence presented by Amnesty International today. Hubertus tweets, Richie, 50 people twice a week. The prison only holds 2,000, if I remember. So where were all the people being rounded up from? That's from Hubertus. That's a good question. It's a good question. Alex tweets, but it works, Richie. People don't see through Sky, BBC and all the mainstream media bullshit. Bias and general fuckwittery. It's not that they don't see through it, Alex. You're right, they don't care, mate. Generally, people don't care, you know. As long as you have money for the pub, as long as you have money to put petrol in the car, and as long as you have your TV and your films and your reality TV and all of that, as long as you've got all of that, it doesn't matter to people. That's where we are.